Scott, how are you doing?
Hey, Frans. So awesome to be here with you. Hello, everyone who is joining us here for Martech for 2024. Our hour-long discussion here covering just some of the topics and themes of this new Martech for 2024 report that we have just released as of, oh my goodness, right now. I'm Scott Brinker. I'm the editor of the Chief Martech blog. I've been doing this for about 15 years, also VP Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, and the author of a couple books in the space. And I'm joined by my collaborator, Frans.
Yes, fellow Martech nerd. Love Martech stacks and Martech in general, figuring out how we can serve people and companies. So yeah, looking into a lot of data and I think a lot of that we're going to share to see how you can build a killer stack.
And before we begin on this in earnest, we want to take a moment to thank the sponsors who made this possible. This has been a 5-month research project, arguably quite a bit longer than that too. And with the generous support of Growth Loop, mParticle, OfferFit, SAS, and Snowplow, they help make this available to you for completely free for you, as well as the report. And of course, we also want to give a shout out to Goldcast, who is the wonderful platform we are using here today for this groovy webinar. So I know normally on like these sort of content webinar things, they like wait until the very end to give you the goods. Like, oh, no, you got to stick around and listen to us ramble before we'll actually give you the content. We're not going to do that. You can actually go and get this report right now in Goldcast. Look over in the tab there on the right for docs. Under that, you should see a Martech for 2024 report. You can click that and get it. If you then want to bail immediately, we completely understand, but then you would miss out on this next hour of like witty repartee between, two giant Martech nerds, right?
Yes.
Well, all right. So what we're going to cover here, in our session today, check. We're already done with the intro. We're going to talk a little bit about some updates to the Martech landscape, that wonderful beast of a graphic, a little bit about the long tail happening within it. Then we're going to dive into the themes that, Frans and I really see as this foundation of transformation in Martech today, around composability and aggregation. We have a few perspectives to share from our sponsors. And then if you make it all the way through that, we're going to give you the real secret advice, of how to make sure you can survive all this incredible change in the year ahead. So I guess with no further ado, Frans, take it away on the landscape.
Yeah, the landscape. Oh my God. I think we got a lot of questions around generative AI. How is it impacting all of this? But also, and this is the question we get every single time we show the super graphic, will it consolidate? And the answer is, this is what we published in May. And we thought we were done for the year, but we're not. So we've added 2,000 new ones and counting. It's crazy. So we're now at 13,080. And if you go to Martech map and search for it, it's live already. And it's a crazy number. And the question is, of course, is this just generative AI? Did you expect this, Scott?
Oh man, this, I knew there was a lot happening around generative AI, but to actually like catalog it, I know you're going to be able to go through some of the categories and give a bunch of examples, but to put this in context, if you look at the bottom of this graph, from 2011 to 2015, right? This was a 4-year period to grow to about 2,000 Martech solutions on that map. We've added that many just within the past 6 months. That's, quite a testament to the acceleration of software that AI has driven.
Yeah, and we couldn't have done it without all those people helping us out, validating tools, tribe members across the globe, sifting through all those tools and figuring out, okay, is it Martech? Is it helpful? Can we use it? And we're using machine learning, but always a human eye glances over it. And is this all generative AI is the question. And the answer is only 73%. to be exact. And mind you, we went through 5,000 tools. We found new ones, on those sources that publish for, I don't know why they do it, landscapes, with logos on it.
You got to be crazy to publish these logo landscapes. Yeah.
Yeah, get a hobby.
There's a help group for us.
Yeah. And the thing is, we found so many. We went through all of those, and we found that 2,042 are really, really interesting for the landscape in terms of adding immediate value. So 73% is Gen AI. The rest, and I thank Cabinet M, Anita Burton, PIM vendors, Chris Jobsen, and many, many other people supplying those things to us. People submitting stackies and stacks on the stack builder, and then we find new tools that we never heard of. It's amazing. So keep doing it. It's a very vibrant community. And consolidation. I think we'll talk about that a lot more. For now, I just want to take you through Gen AI and what we have seen, because you might now know it's 73%, but where did it land? And the usual suspect, of course, is content. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, you can build an empire with all the Gen AI that has been surfacing. And an empire, I mean, of course, a business. So let me take you through this in a kind of a narrative. You're building your own company. Let's do some wireframing in Figma, and let's automate that. And then, chat your site into existence, or maybe even autocomplete in your, your chatbot, or maybe your search bar. And then you create a video or a podcast that you can create small videos from. You can do video webinars that you turn into social posts. Man, they're complete entire ad agencies that are just AI driven. The last two ones in here, it's crazy. And these people are just playing around. They're not pretending they are an ad agency per se, but you see the power in there. It goes from briefing to agreement to artwork to actually publishing the high-res files. It's really impressive. So I can imagine, you built your own business there, and the next step is you take it out there. You take it into social media, for instance. Well, this is where you have a tool that combines ChatGPT, so to speak, with Canva, with Hootsuite in one. So you can build your own posts, and then you can schedule it in a different tool. You can comment automatically in your tone of voice in a third tool. And you're building up all these replies and content, so you can build your own chatbot based on that for your services and department. You can build your own documentation because you don't want to explain everything over and over again, so you can generate that as well. You can even listen with AI to all the different channels and voices of customer and get insights instantly out of that. And this is just the social component. If we go to, for instance, the part here, which is advertising, this part is the least affected, so to speak, with Gen AI, which is kind of surprising. I think it will change. If you look at a tool like GumGum, which is about targeting, contextual targeting, and contextual advertising, even brand safety is something you can send out a tool that looks for your logo being used or abused, or your brand name. It's all next level. And we're still not finished building it to a company. So, for instance, you have your presentation because you get your first leads in. You want to qualify your leads. You can use AI for that as well. Hyper qualify, they call it. And then you can simplify the way you get your data in. Salespeople don't really like to make documentation or write down what they spoke about. You can just use their emails, Gen AI, and it puts it in your CRM. And it goes on and on. You can even automate your pipeline with that. You can even have contextual product positioning in your website or in your catalog, your e-commerce platform. And this is, by the way, sales automation, enablement, and intelligence is the second largest area to be affected by Gen AI. We're not there yet. What about data? We're collecting all this data, and on top, customer data, but we can also do some competition research with AI. And with all that data, we can integrate automatically. So this is a Gen AI-driven data integration. And why not build your own LLM and then talk to your data through an interface that you can, just like a dialogue interface, you talk to your data. And this is beautiful. The last two examples here are really talking about making sure you don't have to use SQL anymore. You just write down what you need and it looks up over different data sources. I'm loving it. I mean, it's really democratization of data and Martech. So for instance, the last one, if you don't have an idea what to do, just use a Gen AI tool for creating a value proposition with a canvas. And then maybe be inspired by your colleagues, have maybe more knowledge, fewer meetings, and also user information, user intent, create documentation out of it, product descriptions, all Gen AI based. It's crazy. So I remember there was this guy I follow, and a couple of years ago, he started something, and it was mind-blowing. It was insanity. He said 12 startups in 12 months. I think we can do it in 12 days, maybe even 12 hours. Oh, boy. What do you think?
You look at all these examples, of these new capabilities that these AI-powered Martech tools are providing. It's fascinating. I mean, you've just, at the speed of light, you've sort of given in like 1/100th of the examples,
Yes.
of the ones we found. And I know we've got some cynics in our audience, skeptics in our audience who are like, yeah, but how long are these different tools going to stick around? What's their half-life? Don't worry, we're going to get to this discussion here too, because we have a lot to share here on what we found about the structure of the long tail and the role these sorts of apps play in it. But I guess another dimension, of the continually expanding Martech landscape is just how global it is and how regional some of this global innovation is too.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And really all the tools we just shared, it shows how composable a new stack can be. And here you go. United States provided most of the new Gen AI. United Kingdom second, and then Iceland. That was surprising.
I didn't see that coming. I admit.
I think some volcano erupted some AI tools. I don't know what's happening there, but it's crazy. The other countries are well placed, but Iceland was a big surprise also to my team when they went like, oh, what's going on here? So if you want to move or had plans to move to Iceland, or were concerned if there's a good Martech climate, there is. So. And by country, we have been following a lot of tools already. We, with Europe, now passed the 5,000 mark with more than 5,000 tools in the European region. And you must think we're making jokes about publishing all these logos, but there's one reason why we started doing this and continue to do so. We have to immerse ourselves in what are these tools doing out there. Not every single one of them. But here's the doctor's advice. Martech doctor, if something like that exists, try a tool of these once a week, just for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Go in, do a freemium. They won't stalk you. And I've done it. I do it all the time. Try to figure out what it is that they do. And it really helps to get to grips with all these developments. And honestly, half of the time I get lost and don't know really how to use it, but that's okay. You get a really good feel for what's out there. And we see so many variations. We see so many different tools. And here we go back to consolidation. Consolidation. Well, when will it be, reducing the number of tools out there? And I loved what you said in the preparations, Scott. Consolidation is not a strategy. And what we are going to see in the stuff we're going to show you now is that probably big tools, small tools are here to stay. And if you look at the small box here with the bullet points, there's so many reasons why a smaller tool or a regional tool or a vertical tool has a reason to be there. And these tools, yes, they are being replaced, but the number of new tools is net more than what is churning. So it's legislation, it can be language, it can be support, it can be payment system, it can be anything. So I think it's time we speak about that, Scott, and talk about the long tail, because if you talk about small and big tools, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, by the way, because I don't want to miss this moment to also plug that Frans, like every year, like you actually work with your tribe members to create landscapes of Martech originating from different countries across the world. You've just released a whole bunch of the updated ones there too. So I just want to encourage our audience to go to martechtribe.com and pick those up. But yeah, I mean, these are examples of things that what we would classically call in the long tail of Martech, that although we've got all these little logos on the Martech landscape, they're not all equal in size. They're not all equal in revenue, and it is a classic long tail distribution, like Chris Anderson's version of the long tail, where there's a relatively small number of very large companies at the head. These are mostly the large public companies in the Martech space. There's then probably several hundred tools that we would categorize in the torso, companies probably with 100 million or more already in revenue. They tend to be very much the leaders within particular categories. And then everything else falls into this long tail. But this is not a homogeneous sea. There are very different kinds of companies operating in the long tail. The one you were just talking about here, Frans, for these regional products that in their particular, country, in their particular geo, they're fantastic. They're loved, and part of it is because, they understand the culture. They've got the right thing in the language. The support is in that language. The payments part. I mean, just, the ecosystems around those things are very geo-specific. We see this with vertical market software that specializes in a particular industry, functional specialists that, are the very best at what they do with a particular capability. A whole bunch of stuff like that happens in like content creation, like podcasting tools, video tools. Around the large platforms that exist in the head, we've seen this explosion over the past few years of ecosystems around them, apps built specifically for those platforms that augment and enhance their capabilities. Services companies, agencies are increasingly creating software that they offer their clients as a way to optimize their engagements. And then, even out of all those things that are very commercial in nature, there's a large number of these products, a number of the ones you pointed out here in your run through of some of these new AI tools, we could almost call as a hobby horse. It's not necessarily a business yet, but it's one or two people in a metaphorical garage, experimenting with ideas. Not all of these are going to grow up to become the next, billion dollar juggernaut. But there is so much like innovation that moves the industry forward coming out of those categories, and again, like you can't measure everything in that long tail by like, oh, well, is it something that, A16Z would, invest, $500 million in? No, it's like there's a range for these different products, like what their longevity is, a lot to do with where their specialization is, where their customer is, and the degree to which they're a fit for institutional capital. But that doesn't mean like those are the only axes that matter in how this industry is evolving. And I think some of the data you've been analyzing here over the years, Frans, on how these products in the long tail actually appear in people's Martech stacks is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it's crazy. And if you look at it, you talked about, for instance, hobby horses and the likes. I think there's a lot of innovation happening there, but not all of those tools want to become stock listed. There are different reasons to start a business and to do a business. By the way, we did some research on what Martech stacks are technology vendors actually using. And we saw three thresholds, basically. You mentioned 100 million. Indeed, above 100 million, you have a different stack than below 100 million and below 6 million. So you drastically have to, reorganize, change the way you use your Martech stack in technology as a technology vendor. So yeah, the head, the torso, and the tail. But what is striking, it's not changing over the years. So somehow this is a very, calm, balanced type of division of head, torso, and tail tools. And that's kind of surprising because the number of subscriptions is not reducing. Maybe you can talk us through that.
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we listen very closely to the data published by SaaS management platforms. These are companies like Productive and Tori, Better Cloud, that their whole mission in life is to help companies like organize and manage all their SaaS subscriptions. And as a result, they have the empirical ground truth about how many SaaS subscriptions different companies have. And one of the things we've seen from the reports that they've issued here over the past several years is, right, generally speaking, SaaS portfolios have continued to grow. In 2021, 2022, they actually grew, quite a bit. There's been a little bit of a pullback, in 2023, but we have to recognize it's still quite diverse. And I think what you were saying here earlier, Frans, it really resonated with me. When you pulled together this graph, we're looking across all these different stacks, and mentions of tools they're using that we would categorize as the head, products from the torso, and products from the tail. From 2017 to 2022, the ratios, the relative distribution of those numbers of tools has been actually quite constant, Now, we know there's like consolidation that happens. We know, tools, get absorbed into some of the larger tools, tools lose their relevance or uniqueness over time. But instead of everything just moving into the head, what happens there is as stuff starts to move into the torso and the head, other new things start to emerge, that come into the tail as a way for people to be able to take advantage of some of these new emerging capabilities. And so over time, what you have is pretty consistently about 50% of Martech stacks have tools that are 50% of most Martech stacks are long tail tools. Yes. Again, this is dynamic. This isn't, like, oh, well, I've got this long tail tool and it will necessarily stick around for a decade. Again, in many ways, this is sort of a part of the evolution of how tech stacks move forward. And I think one of the things that you've done in your analysis, Frans, I found particularly interesting is like where the motivations are for these companies that keep adopting these long tail tools as a part of their tech strategy.
Yes, and that is fascinating because if you look at those divisions between the balance, the constant balance between head, torso, and tail tools, it's not changing a lot. So for me, the conclusion almost feels like we need them all, not as many as we can, but there's a certain balance. And there's always this debate like, are you best of enterprise, best of breed, which is not necessarily a bad conversation. But it's not one or the other, it's both. Maybe the smaller tools are completing the gaps in the bigger ones. So what we see here, for instance, because you might argue, oh, all those young tools may be disruptors, but maybe buggy. Well, we combined our data together with Martech Map with Clearbit and G2 for ratings and Clearbit for the year they were founded. And we see that the age and ratings go hand in hand, but the younger you are, the more, the better the rating. Of course, less legacy, you're closer to the client, you're maybe developing for people close and close to the client, that makes sense. But it's still very fascinating. And if you look at revenue and rating, you see a similar pattern. So smaller tools, in terms of revenue, get better ratings. But hold your horses. It doesn't mean that the big companies are toast or are no good. Quite the opposite. Because we did some further research on, okay, what's happening here exactly with the big tools? So we dove into something like CRM features. So we have the big tools like CRM, marketing automation, CMS, CP, and we see the same patterns all the time. What requirements, what features do people like, use, or miss? So like means the blue ones, the blue bubbles, the green dots are most used, and the yellow ones are most missed. And what you see here, we asked on the Likert scale, do you like it or not? 5 means, yes, we love it. 3 means neutral, and 1 means we don't like it, we don't use it. If you look at it, a small portion of all those requirements and features are used well and liked most. And that struck us. It's like, okay, it doesn't mean that the other features are not relevant, that you should just kill them. You might need them in sync, in concert with the other more used features. So this is kind of, let's call it atomization, where you focus on features and you need some features really well from these big platforms, and they need to scale and outperform, be GDPR compliant and what have you, in order to make it work. And we see this happening also in marketing automation. Here, by the way, I think, Scott, you spoke about the yellow dots earlier.
Yeah, no, well, it strikes me that, for these major platforms, people have a whole bundle of capabilities that they do use, they do love, that as you start to go down this tail, depending on, the particular platform you have, there might be some other particular capability you want that isn't really served or served the way you want it served in that particular platform. And so I think anytime like someone's saying like, oh yeah, I've got this thing I really miss that isn't quite in, my core platform, that is an opportunity for one of these long tail solutions to be able to complement those platforms.
Absolutely. And here you see a bit of a dispersion of all the yellow dots. If you go to marketing automation, you see that a lot less. So I would say it's an opportunity for long tail tools to jump in, as well as make your yellow dots features more feature complete. That's how it works. I think how the market works. And I think this also sheds a different light on Martech utilization. So when are we utilizing Martech well? And I think you have some stats on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, really credit to Gartner here, who every year is asked a question about, they ask, marketers, particularly at large organizations, what percentage of your Martech stack do you think you're utilizing? And it's always a bit of a weird question, in my opinion, because like, it sounds like something you feel more than like something necessarily truly quantitative. But hey, even as something that, these marketers feel, it's a legitimate, index on it. And what they've seen is from 2020 to 22 to 2023, this utilization rate, how much marketers feel they're really taking advantage of the capabilities in their stack, has dropped to an all-time low of 33%. And so when I looked at the, data that you would put together, about like, again, for these major platforms, what the distribution is of what people are using, one of the other things that sort of pops out there is, boy, there's a really long tail there too, of a whole bunch of capabilities that typically most marketers aren't using within their existing platforms. But I think you and I have talked about this a lot. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. One of the things we have to constantly step back and remember, we're in the business of creating value for our businesses, value for our customers. And when we look at capabilities in a Martech stack, there's kind of three different lenses. There's the features a particular Martech product has, and particularly as you get to these larger platforms, they have a lot of features. There's then the skill set we have of our own marketing operations, marketing tech team to harness this. And we'll talk a bit more about that later too, I think. And then there's like the one that really matters, which is what are the things we can do that are going to create value for our business and our customers. And in this Venn diagram, I mean, these circles overlap, but they very rarely overlap in their entirety. And I think it's just really an interesting question to note that like, okay, if there were a bunch of features in a particular product that we don't use, if at the particular stage our business is at, what we're trying to do, what our strategy is, if those particular features aren't relevant to the value creation, it's actually, it's a good thing not to be utilizing those features. What did you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like if you look at the diagram with the most liked, most used, most missed, if you would try to use the other stuff, and I understand people, product owners or owner of a certain system, admin, being frustrated, but yeah, to your point, if it doesn't drive value, then why would you do it? And it feels almost like, and I think this is a nice bridge to the next topic. If you buy a piano and you don't hit all the keys all the time, are you underutilizing your piano? I think Mozart would disagree. So I think we have to compose stuff. So let's take it away. Let's talk about composability.
All right, composability indeed. So there's sort of two major themes that we cover in the report. Trust me, there's a lot in there about AI, but really what we're looking at are this evolution of the concepts of composability and aggregation, because in many ways, we believe these concepts architecturally in Martech are the things that, they're the shoulders, the giant shoulders upon which a lot of these new AI capabilities are really going to be able to stand. So composability is one of those words, we're hearing more and more. Part of what we want to do here today, but also in the report, is simplify the explanation for this. It isn't rocket science. In the simplest way, you look at this as like, okay, well, across my stack, I've got, my large platforms. I might have some of these tools from the tail, and I want the ability to, as flexibly as possible, leverage capabilities from each of them in delivering a particular app or experience or workflow, and have the freedom at any point in time to pull any other solution, large or small, from the larger market. Now, when you think about composability, again, what is it at its core? Well, it's like if you consider your Martech stack of all these different apps that increasingly have APIs to expose functionality, they have their data. You might have some of your own apps that you've built. You have probably very likely a cloud data warehouse with more data repositories than that. There's all these other services available in the cloud you might want to leverage. Composability at the end of the day is the ability to say, like, you can treat that entire collection as a menu, from which you're able to draw upon to orchestrate any particular customer experience or any particular business operations workflow that is going to be valuable to your business. And this idea of composability, we're talking a lot more about it explicitly, but it's been around for a while. It's been around in Martech for a while. We give a bunch of examples, but on the far left here, the more technical end of the spectrum, composability is how all software is created today. No programmer just starts from scratch, other than maybe Hello World, to build an application. They're leveraging a whole set of libraries, frameworks, APIs from the cloud that they're able to compose into the unique application they're trying to create. On the other end of the spectrum, you think about spreadsheets, right? What is a spreadsheet? Really, in a very simplified way, it's the ability for business users to take different data from different sources and compose it together into a sheet to do a particular analysis, a prediction, a presentation. This is what composition is all about. And we now see this composability appearing in all sorts of different kinds of tools, very explicitly, no-code tools, like iPasses, composable DXPs, composable CDPs. And so that actually is going to get us into, the meat here of talking about aggregation as a pattern for enabling composability in a relatively coherent fashion. So, Frans, you were saying earlier here, okay, if you're waiting for consolidation, might be waiting a long time. Consolidation is not a strategy on its own. It's there's some good, clean, healthy living there in trying to consolidate as much as you can. But when we talk about aggregation, though, I think it's fair for normal folks to be like, well, wait a second, what's the difference between consolidation and aggregation? They kind of sound a little bit like the same thing. So to simplify the explanation, consolidation is this idea you've got a whole bunch of things out there and you want to reduce it down to a small number of things. Don't get me wrong, this is a force in the Martech market. It is a strategy we take in rationalizing Martech stacks, but on its own, it is not sufficient. As the ever-growing evolution of the Martech market, and the count of tools in Martech stacks continually attest to. Aggregation is different. It's basically being comfortable with the idea that we're going to have a whole bunch of these different things, but what we want to do is we want to be able to simplify the way in which we work with them to provide a more coherent interface to them. And this concept, is shamelessly stolen here from Ben Thompson of Stratechery, who talked about aggregation theory as a way of understanding the power and the leverage, of, for instance, major social media platforms, Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, where they are essentially aggregating millions of social media creators. They're not trying to consolidate the number of creators in the world. In fact, the more creators, the better. They're providing an aggregation layer that provides so much value to both the creators and the consumers. Same thing with smartphone platforms, iOS and Android, right? They're helping to aggregate, millions of mobile apps to make it easier for any given user to be able to tap into the subset, of apps that are relevant to what they're doing. we see this pattern now emerging inside company tech stacks as well. And one of the clearest examples are these data warehouse platforms, things like Snowflake or Amazon Redshift or Databricks, where they're effectively aggregating dozens, even hundreds of data sources from across your business, and then making it easier for other applications across your business to consume and access those data sources. When you start to look at it through this lens, you see things like this is a way of like reframing like the mission of CRM platforms. You know, one of the things they're doing is they're helping to aggregate, you know, data and interface engagement across dozens or hundreds of different customer touch points. In fact, if we look across the entire Martech landscape, you know, and we see like these different layers, you know, that marketing technology operates at, you know, the data layer, the workflow and logic and orchestration layer, the UI presentation layer, even the governance layer, is in each of these layers, we're seeing these companies, these platforms emerge that really help to aggregate across many different sources and syncs across them. Cloud data warehouses, of course, you know, one of the big ones on the data side. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail here in a minute. At the workflow and logic side, right? We've seen a tremendous amount of this with iPaaS and workflow automation, you know, data pipelining and orchestration solutions. At the UI level, even things like Microsoft Teams and Slack, like help to aggregate, you know, notifications, data analytics with Tableau or Looker or SAS. Even like, yeah, again, some of these like domain platforms like in CRM, you know, HubSpot, a Salesforce, a Microsoft Dynamics, they start to provide a UI interface to help people aggregate the activities that are happening across those different customer touch points. I mean, even the thing we were talking about with the SaaS management platforms like Productive, you know, that's an example of like the more SaaS tools you have in your stack, the more value you are probably getting out of a SaaS management platform that helps to aggregate the governance of them. So I want to take a brief little detour here because as we talk about composability around aggregation, there's a somewhat nerdy concept. You knew coming to this webinar, you were going to be subjected to nerdy concepts. So thanks for bearing with us. You know, is this thing in software known as Conway's Law. And really simply, Conway's Law says that a software product tends to be a reflection of the people who build it. You know, the way in which those teams think, the way in which they communicate, the way in which they're organized. You know, I would argue like the culture and the philosophy of the company that builds the software, all of that gets embedded into what a software app is. You know, people talk about opinionated software. That is what it is the opinion of the people who created it. Okay, this is all fine and good, you know, but then when you think about the buyers of software, particularly, you know, larger software applications, in many cases, then we have to adapt the way our company operates and works to match the opinions of that software. And so I think of this as like inverse Conway's Law. It's software influencing, you know, the organization rather than the other way around. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, particularly in, you know, the early stages of digital transformation. It's actually been very helpful for a lot of companies to get that influence from these software products about how to rethink and reorganize what they're doing. But as companies get more and more mature with their digital operations, you know, their digital customer experiences, they get to a more advanced stage where, okay, they now have their own opinions of how they want these things to operate, the experiences they want to deliver. And what you start to see is a shift of, you know, companies increasingly not just being happy consuming or configuring an app, but wanting to customize it, wanting to compose across multiple apps, you know, even being able to create more of their own. Now, it might be fair to ask, like, okay, well, how sophisticated of a company do you have to be to do that? What sort of like, you know, rocket science PhDs do you need to make that happen? You know, and once upon a time, a fair number, but no longer, right? I mean, there's a steady democratization of so much of these capabilities that for many years we've referred to this as the no-code, you know, movement. And again, it's not like no-code does everything or these high-end advanced use cases, but for a lot of simple, you know, low-end use cases, and increasingly more and more, it's giving more people the power to compose, you know, these workflows or experiences they want. And what we see with happening with Gen AI in particular is it is providing a new layer that is going to make it even easier, for the non-experts to be able to self-serve more and more of their low-end needs in orchestrating workflows on demand and being able to do, as you were saying, Frans, the talk to your data, like being able to do data analysis, on demand. If you can describe it in natural language, you can get the result on the other side. And that we're going to see this continually evolve. So I know, Frans, one of the great ways you've been framing this is, it's not a world about sweet versus best of breed, but we've got both. But really what we want to be thinking of is at a higher level, for our customers, for our business operations, what's the best of feature? What's the best of data? What's the best of content? Getting the right thing to the right place at the right moment. And so we're talking a little bit there in composability, about what you could say is kind of almost like the best of feature view of that. We want to dive a little bit more deeply into the data side. Cloud data warehouses are certainly where we're seeing a lot of this aggregation pattern right now. But I think it's helpful to recognize how significant of an architectural shift this is in Martech. For decades, basically, Martech apps had their own databases, and this became a very siloed way of data. I mean, we've worked hard to try and integrate across that. Even things like CDPs, one of their reasons for coming to existence was to help facilitate that. But you still had a fair amount of fragmentation, not just within marketing, but then across the rest of the organization as well, too. And over time, we started to push more data from these applications down into data warehouses, largely with the eye towards, if we get down to the data warehouse, we can start to do some analytics that, span the wider business. Although the truth is, a lot of the data that would get, dumped down into the data warehouse, just sort of sat there. I think the stat was something like 68%, never got touched at all. Well, what's been happening in these past couple years, really accelerating this year, we see this moving into 2024, is thanks to this concept of reverse ETL, which if ETL is about getting stuff, loading stuff into our data warehouse, reverse ETL, see if you can guess what this is, right? It's about pushing things out from the cloud data warehouse, back into these apps. And while that's kind of sounds like a really esoteric thing down in, the technical garage, the technical basement, the truth is, this is game changing, because what we've now got is these cloud data warehouses, both from an economics and performance and a connectivity perspective, are now becoming like a universal data layer where all of the data coming from these different apps, it can then be in one place where we're able to not only analyze it, but be able to, manipulate it, to model it, to combine it together in interesting ways, and then push it back up, into these frontline applications, which is coming at an absolutely incredible time here as, third-party cookies, are fading away. We're looking for more and more first-party data to leverage. This architecture is giving us absolute wealth of first-party data that marketers are increasingly able to harness. So I know that was a super techie diagram. If you like super techie diagrams, please do download the report. Super techie diagrams galore. The simpler version of this as a takeaway is, right, we're moving from an architecture where, it was mostly marketing operations generating data, and having it dumped down into the data warehouse, never to be seen again, to something that is truly an interactive flywheel environment between everything that's data in our organization and everything we might want to do for marketing. All right. Again, there's a lot more in the report on this. But one of the things, Frans, and I wanted to share with you is in the report, there's a series of interviews we had with our sponsors. We steered away from, overtly commercial discussions with them and tried to just tap into their insights and expertise on some of these trends, to provide a different point of view. I don't know, Frans, what were some of your favorites?
Yeah, so I really love talking to CEOs of and founders of Martech companies. They are so passionate. They know why they did it. You can even ask, what was that moment that you decided, okay, let's do this. Let's change the market. And this is a great example that Christopher is doing with Growth Loop. By the way, it was called Flywheel earlier, so that's really tapping into your previous slide. And it's really a flywheel. It's really growth loop. It's looping through growth learning, because we're tapping into data, but not enough. And what he's been doing, he said, the problem is we need to stop copying data left and right and center, integrate. We just have to plug in on top of a data warehouse and just extract that data and start working with audiences right there. And I think that is a game changer. That's really that composability, skipping a couple of steps, stopping to thinking, I'm a software, isolated, and I should work on my own. No, I work in an ecosystem. I work in a stack. And now what do I provide as a feature, as a functionality? Well, I love that about this tool and about this vision that he has.
Yeah, no, this was one of the great things about these discussions is, these trends around aggregation and composability and what's happening in cloud data warehouse. It's like all of these companies, are seeing this play out, with their customers, with a lot of the technology that they're continuing to innovate. Had a great discussion with Michael Katz, the co-founder and CEO of mParticle. And again, they've been like really focused on this concept of being able to compose data from, across the organization and be able to harness it effectively, in real time, very high stakes, marketing engagements. So I think, it's one of the things that he touched on too in that interview, and it's worth reading its whole thing, is, just getting the data into the cloud data warehouse on its own. This is a necessary first step, but it's not sufficient. The work that needs to be done on then how we structure and govern things on top of that, how we make sure we're actually able, from an infrastructure process, to pipe it to the right place at the right time. There's plenty of opportunity here for how Martech can help make that happen as well.
Yeah, and really happy and surprised in a positive way with George's insights on generative AI. As you saw, we talked about generative AI and what tools and where is it emerging. It's writing content, like he says, but his point about interpretation of data, where generative AI can make really a big difference, talk to your data, it's incredibly important. I really think this is a game changer. This insight, this mindset that he's sharing with us here is game changing, because clients are talking to us through the data, and we're not using data enough. I see that time and time again when I talk to clients, I go like, why are you not using your data? Because we can't access it. We don't know how to interpret it. Well, here you go. And make sure you do so, because that will drastically bring you to a point where you can see what features are the best for me, for my client, for my company, which data and which content. I love this insight here.
Yeah, and I should, in full disclosure, I'm an advisor to OfferFit as well too. But their whole concept of like going beyond the world of this manual A/B testing to leveraging an AI engine to be able to dramatically accelerate the amount of experimentation you can do. Super exciting, but it's an example of one of these things that is basically building on that data foundation. Like if you have more of your data accessible now throughout, this cloud data warehouse, then tools like OfferFit that are able to sit on top of that, you're basically just giving more fuel to the fire.
Yeah, and I love the responsible marketing concept, because in our preparations, we were talking about, do we dare to say that, basically Martech, as it is right now, with the inclusion now of generative AI, it's covering it all. We can create any customer experience we want, right? And there will be more tools and more technologies and insights, but with generative AI, we can interpret data and we can create any type of content at scale in the near future. So now it becomes really about the customer experience, and trust is a very, very big topic in there. I think they might be even a bit ahead of the time or really on time, but responsible marketing is so important. How do you build trust? What do you think, Scott?
No, isn't there like this Spider-Man meme we need to like invoke? With great power comes, great responsibility. Yeah. One of the things, and John and Michael like described it very well in their interview, but SaaS actually thinks about this in like these three different layers. One layer is like, okay, responsible marketing has to do with the data. Are we treating it responsibly? Are we adhering to the right regulations, the privacy, the expectations of our customers? They have a second layer where it's like really thinking about how to responsibly use the technology, not just the data, but the technology. So much of this new AI is changing the nature of how we can run our marketing teams, changing the nature of how we interact with customers, but we have to bring to that, our framing of what is ethically the right things to do here. We have to be on the lookout, for ways in which these algorithms, can introduce unexpected biases, and unwanted side effects. So there's a lot of work for that. And then the third, which I think will resonate with everyone in the audience here who has had a conversation with their finance department recently, as part of the responsibility is just making sure that we are applying the budget we invest in marketing technology and all of our other marketing efforts, in a way that is really guaranteed to, show that it's a responsible use, of these funds. It's not that we shouldn't take chances or we shouldn't experiment, but we're taking a framework to doing this, in a very pragmatic way. And so, and then I guess Snowplow is, the last of our, 5 sponsors, a great interview of how they really provide a lot of insight into operationalizing that first-party data that's ending up here in the cloud data warehouse and how to leverage it on the customer experience. One of the quotes I pulled from Alex Dean, their co-founder and CEO, was they're definitely right in the middle of the discussion here around all things, composable, but what resonated with me was, in his view, composability isn't just a property of a particular product, like a composable CDP or a composable DXP or a composable fill in the blank here. They're valuable. That's definitely a part of the equation. But composability is this higher level concept, of really the way you and I have been thinking about this, Frans, of your entire Martech stack. Best of feature, best of data, best of content. This is the kind of composability that we want to enable. All right, I know we've got about 10 minutes left here, and we promised our friends, that if they stuck with us, we're like, okay, here's all this incredible stuff that's happening in Martech. 2024 is going to be a heck of an adventure. We'll give you a little bit of survival advice for navigating through that. And I think the first thing just to recognize is oh my goodness, the hype curve, it's like the bane of existence. I think everyone feels it's not just one hype curve, it's multiple hype curves assailing us from multiple directions simultaneously. And as if that wasn't enough, it's like these hype curves that used to be these things, oh, well, this will play out over years and years and years. Feels like it's compressing. I mean, the hype curve around ChatGPT alone feels like, it's gone through 2 or 3 iterations in just the past 12 months. This is actually a great opportunity for people who are in these leadership roles in marketing operations and marketing technology, because we really believe the mission isn't to ignore these changes. You don't want to do that. I mean, these are real technologies. These are real shifts, in what's possible. But you as the expert on the marketing tech and marketing ops side, it's really your responsibility to help mitigate, having companies basically go to extremes, get too carried away with the hype too early, or get too disillusioned, with what the possibilities are too early, and to really help navigate through a very steady and pragmatic, if you kind of imagine a slice right through the middle of that hype curve of what we would say is the Goldilocks zone in Martech application, Martech adoption. So Frans, I mean, you've thought a lot about this. I've seen so many, you map this hype curve into, ability curves and grief curves, and it's fascinating how this pattern appears through so many dynamics, in the human world. But you've also come up with this really awesome framework for just, okay, consistently in that environment, how do marketing ops and marketing tech leaders think about evolving and productizing these new capabilities?
Yeah, so in terms of the hype cycle, it's not only applying to the market, it's applying to a company, or maybe even to a business unit, or yourself. Where is your knowledge and experience, and how can you flatten that curve so you stay in the green Goldilocks zone? And one of the ways, and I think with composability and best of feature, data and content, we're trying to bring across the idea of keep it small and simple, because a customer journey doesn't consist of a million touch points and a million, I'm exaggerating, but it actually, the reverse is true. We see that you have to atomize the way you shape your use cases and your customer journeys. So think of it as a campaign. A campaign has a start and an end. It's a project. So you will see common denominators emerging, patterns, and that is maybe the fabric of your customer journey, what's generating the value. So you go from defining what you see to standardizing what you see. And then once you've standardized it, you can automate it. So it's what we call hack, pack, and stack. So hacking is really like, okay, we don't know what works. We just give it a try, put data, software together, and see if it builds traction. And if it does, okay, then we put it in some kind of design rule and say, okay, clean it up, take out everything, make sure it's GDPR compliant, which it should be in the hack phase as well. But then, take it to the next level and then implement it into a stack. This is how you can, prevent your company from going into legacy, but also, and maybe it's a new phrase and term I'm coining here, overutilizing your Martech, thinking that you need to hit all the keys in order to utilize it fully. Software, and I'm not sure if I'm going to make friends here, but software is not solving problems. You are using certain features as a user, and then you compose something that really resonates with your audience. And I think that's how you should use the whole organization framework of hack, pack, and stack, and make it more human. That's one of my catchphrases. Humanize Martech.
Cheers on that.
And I think with humanizing Martech, if you make it not only human for the user but also for the client, because it's all about the client building trust, like Saf says, then I think we're really at an inflection point in this Martech law. And I think that's something you can elaborate on.
Yeah, well, I think maybe this is a good way to wrap things up. Is it feels like the whole journey of the past decade in Martech, has been wrestling with this thing of the technology continues to change at a very rapid rate, while we know organizations like we don't. And there is no silver bullet to this challenge. This is, I sometimes call this the quintessential management challenge of the 21st century. I think that's true. That being said, because we know organizations change at a slower pace than technology, the onus is on us as leaders to be, first of all, very strategic and intentional about which changes we embrace, because we can't embrace them all at the same time. Which ones are really most relevant to our business and to our customers. Doing fewer things well, always a good strategy. The second is not all companies change at the same rate. And Frans, you and I have both been long-time advocates, of agile marketing and agile practices in general, because of the fact that, it won't help your company change at an exponential rate, but can help your company adapt faster than your competitors. And that is a real competitive advantage. But the last thing that I would note here is, that rate of change for organizations isn't constant. Every now and again, there are these moments that happen, these punctuated equilibrium, to use an evolutionary biology term, things like what happened with the pandemic, which accelerated so many businesses advancing their digital operations and digital experiences. And I think we're seeing another one right now, with this whole wave of AI. That's again sort of shifting the dimension, of how quickly companies are able to change what they're capable of doing. And so as we go into 2024, our overarching advice, is to definitely lean into this. You have to continue to experiment with this. Hopefully some of the frameworks we've shared with you about how, these aggregation platforms and some of this concept of composability will start to give a little bit more structure to how you can harness a lot of those emerging innovations. But what you want to do is make sure that you aren't missing out. So I think this brings us to the end of our time. And before we have our closing words on this, I do just want to remind everyone, we barely scratched the surface, of what was covered here in this report. But if you go to the docs tab there in the upper right, you should be able to get your copy of Martech for 2024. Any parting advice, my friend?
Ooh, well, I really love that we would, in the Martech community, shift more to what an abundance of solutions are out there and opportunities, and how can we compose that. So, and other than that, I would like to thank everybody who collaborated and supported us. Really, really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, my friend. The collaboration with you this whole year has been fantastic. We definitely want to once again thank our wonderful sponsors. Just could not be able to make this happen without your support. And yeah, most of all of you who have tuned in, thank you. We wish you the absolute best in the year 2024 ahead. And we will be sure to see you next year.
Happy holidays.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.